Welcome to What's Your Story? I'm Charley Timmins, your host. Every week I bring you a guest who is both authentic and genuine, who will share insights and practical information that you can bring into your business or your personal life. Today, what we're going to be talking about is something kind of different. My guest today is Robert King. Robert is the principal of Takepoint Clinical. His practice addresses the bureaucratic quagmire that delays the advance of life-changing medical research that sometimes affects our lives and our families. Robert, welcome to the show.
Thank you, sir.
Robert,
real pleasure to be here.
That's a heck of an opening. Can you elaborate on that a little bit for the audience?
Sure. Well, there's a basic problem in the realm of medical research. When a company like Merck or some drug company or medical device company wants to bring a new product to market or find a new use for an existing product, there's a very involved regulatory process where they have to test the drug out on patients to see how it's going to work. The problem is that these drug companies don't have any patients. Some doctor that may be a doctor at Temple University or Brigham and Women's has patients. So the drug company will approach these doctors and ask them to participate. For the doctors, it's great because they get a chance to bring new medical treatments to their patients, and particularly for those patients that are not well off, the drug company is going to pay for all the care. For the drug companies, they get an opportunity to get data to see whether or not these new drugs can come to market. The problem is, before that can even begin, you have to put a contract and a budget in place between each doctor and each life science company. And what has happened is that the time necessary to do that over the past 10 years has doubled. So before, well, it might take 1 to 3 months to put in place. Now it's taking 2 to 6 months, which doesn't sound like a lot of time, but when you think about all the sites that have to participate in a trial, it might be 100, 150, 200 sites, and you multiply, sure, you can have literally thousands upon thousands of patients that have to participate. When you think of those delays and multiply it by that number, what's happening is that medical care is not getting to the people that need it, because the patients that could use the care frequently are simply timing out of the trials. They no longer have the criteria, or their illness is advanced to the point where they no longer can participate. And for the drug companies, they're spending vast amounts of money and time on bureaucrats and administration when the money should be going to science and patient care.
So this is the area where you focus.
This is the area of focus.
So share with the audience who the clients are. You mentioned clients and patients, and be a little more specific.
Well, for us, we can represent either side of the equation. For starting 2 decades ago, roughly, I went to work in the life sciences industry and quickly got a reputation for being someone who could jumpstart the negotiations of these budgets and contracts. And so for a medical researcher, I've been working for Big Pharma for 17 years. I know what they're not getting. I know what's being left on the table. And I can do the same thing for the drug companies. But what we really want to do is, particularly with smaller and mid-sized life science companies, is most of the problems that cause these delays are really self-inflicted wounds. They're just badly designed trials. What will frequently happen is you'll have people that come over from big pharmaceutical companies. They leave for smaller companies with the idea that it won't be as bureaucratic, that they'll be able to get things more quickly, and then they recreate the same problems that they had at the big company, the small company. And so by designing this trial startup, we can alleviate a lot of these problems before they ever happen. And the goal is to get these trials back on track, both in time and resources.
Why do you do this kind of work? I mean, you found an issue, you found a problem, you're addressing it, but what really drives you? What's at the core of this passion that you have for doing this?
Well, you know, being an attorney, it's very easy to lose sight of what the real end game is. It's easy to get hung up in a negotiation or a clause. So what I always do is keep in mind my real world interaction with these problems. So for me, I think of my mother.
Who?
I think of my mother.
Okay, share that with us.
My mother was an amazing woman. Growing up in the 1940s, she always wanted to be a doctor. And when the time came to go to medical school, she certainly had the grades and the smarts. But our family wasn't wealthy, and her father told her that there was no point in sending her to medical school because she was going to be a wife and a mother. It was a different time. And so she accepted that then, but it always burned inside of her. So 30 years later, she went back to school. She got a doctorate. Her opportunity to go to medical school had passed, but she got a doctorate in reading education. And look, I got a graduate degree when I was 28. I can only imagine what it'd be like going back at 52 to try to do that. And so she got this degree, and then after she got it, finally had this great accomplishment, she took on what many of us would consider just a lost cause. She went to work in the Philadelphia school system in the absolute worst sections of the city. Her job was to go in with high school students who were illiterate just before they got out of the system and teach them how to read well enough to fill out a job application or function.
That's a Hail Mary, my friend.
She was a Hail Mary, because what would happen if you can't read, then what kind of future do you have? These people would have gone to prison or worse. And so she went in and did this, and did this for over a decade. Had tremendous results. She was really good at this. She was a fantastic teacher. And when the time came for her to retire, no one had earned a better retirement. 2 years later, she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And so that's a tragedy, and that's human. We all have experiences just like that. But every time someone is touched by a medical issue, we all hope and pray for the next great breakthrough. And those breakthroughs happen one clinical trial at a time. And so trying to put these trials on track so the focus is on being timely, and the focus is on patient care, and the focus is on getting the data out as quickly as possible, it allows you to touch people. It allows you to just get beyond doing contracts to actually having a real-world impact.
So if you move these things along faster, that sounds like a legacy to me.
I certainly hope so. We're trying to build a legacy. Look, we're all amazed by what's happened with medical science. Even things that you see now, you would say 10 years ago, sound like science fiction,
right.
Let alone 20 or 30 years. But as great as our accomplishments have been, it's masking to an extent this quiet crisis in the industry. There are opportunities that are being lost. They're being lost particularly with the smaller and mid-sized companies because they're burning through their resources to waste and inefficiencies. And if we can in some way remedy that, what other treatments can come to market, what other treatments can happen that right now are being lost just to a failed status quo.
So what's the outcome you're working toward?
Well, the outcome we're working towards is to really change the dynamic in the industry. We believe that we can by approaching it a little bit different, with a more problem-solving attack, we can bring these clinical trials online a little bit faster. One way we do that is really driving collaboration. Being an attorney, I'm in a field that's not particularly known for great communication skills. The reality is that I'm never going to know as much about a trial as the clinicians. And the risks that we have to negotiate are at that interaction between what's on the paper and the contract or the regulations and what's happening in the real world. So if I don't really draw out their knowledge, then we're never going to figure out what all the possibilities are. And if I can come up with 8 possibilities instead of the 2 I'd have just on my own, because I'm working more closely with the scientists, then you've got a better opportunity to solve these problems.
So what is the difference between what you're doing and what other attorneys in that space do?
There are really 3 differences. First of all, because we try to collaborate much more closely, that's unusual. Frequently, these contract and budget negotiations are sort of cloistered away and kept by themselves. And again, that sort of close contact doesn't happen. So that's problem number 1.
Well, you've had experience with that.
Yes.
Personally.
Yes. The other thing is, again, the goal of the company is not just to be a traditional law firm or a set of lawyers. We would love to work with, again, particularly smaller and mid-sized life sciences companies to help them design this trial startup. And that can be one of 100 small changes that no single one might save the day for them, but you take them in total and you're going to be able to get through the processes more quickly. So again, looking at this process, there's a tremendous amount of wasted time. One of the big drug companies took a look and found that during this negotiation process, 3/4 of the time was just wasted. Emails that weren't being answered, asking for things that actually weren't required, things of that nature. So if you can get ahead of this cycle, get ahead of this curve, and really go after the problems in advance, anticipate the problems, you should be able to be much more effective in getting problems solved.
What I'm hearing you talk about is you're approaching this as a business issue, as a business process, not a legal process.
That's true. It's a business process where you have to have a lot of legal knowledge. And it's more than just a business or legal process, it's actually an ethical issue, because we are denying care to people that should be stepping up in these trials.
Well, that's not intentional, is it?
Not intentional at all. It's the status quo. We have a status quo, and people are used to doing things in a certain way, and we're looking to change that way. Look, what we do in medical care is amazing. The science is fantastic. For all the complaints we might have about the price of pharmaceuticals, the changes and developments are spectacular, but the administrative rules and the way we approach the administrative issues upon which all these scientific advances depend are not keeping pace. And so if we can be a small part of a larger conversation that forces our industry to pursue excellence in administration and bureaucracy in a way to get the science moving faster, then we will have secured a legacy. And so we want to do that for our clients, whether they're medical researchers, get them all they should be getting, whether it's a small life science company so that they don't have these problems, so they don't burn through their capital so quickly, so they can get their data faster. And ultimately, we want to do it for the patients, because if we do this, then take it out of the abstract. We know that someone's son or brother or wife is going to have a chance to participate in a trial. And that's amazingly...
Or somebody's mother.
Or somebody's mother.
We need to take a break.
Absolutely.
When we come back, I'd like you to share with the audience an example that, from your experience of accelerating the process.
Sure.
So stay tuned. We'll be right back. And Robert will share a story with us that will illuminate greater the value that he's delivering. Be back in a moment. Word from our sponsor.
Shelter dogs aren't broken. They've simply experienced more life. If they were human, we would call them wise. They would be the ones with tales to tell and stories to write, the ones dealt a bad hand who responded with courage. Do not pity a shelter dog. Adopt one.
Say we've got grit, and we'll take it as a compliment. Because it's our uncommon drive, our spark within, that brings us together and sets us apart. We are temple made. And when others take shortcuts, when others take breaks, when others take the easy way, we take charge.
Add us on social media to watch bloopers, behind-the-scenes footage, previews, and more.
I work 13 hours a day, 6 days a week. So when I'm off the clock, I gotta get stuff done. So when I need a snack, I need something healthy, tasty, and easy to eat. Like wonderful pistachios without the shells. They're protein-powered, delicious, and great on the go. And that's perfect for me. Thanks, Liz. A woman without a lot of time.
Whether you're a gourmet cook or just want to eat like one, visit Rostelli Market Fresh, your home for the freshest, locally sourced ingredients to please everyone who loves great food. Our organic meats, quality seafood, and free-range poultry are cut fresh to order. Chefs create culinary-inspired prep foods made fresh every day, which pair nicely with our vast selection of fine wines and spirits. Choose from handmade pastas, artisan cheeses, organic produce, and grocery items, all from the finest purveyors. Rostelli Market Fresh, from our family to yours.
RVNTV is a platform for people of any industry to share their story. Over 285,000 viewers are tuning in to RVNTV shows monthly. We guarantee a great experience that you'll be sharing with everyone you know while increasing your personal and company's brand awareness. But what is your brand? According to Forbes, it's a combination of your logo, your product, your design and feel, and your personality. Did you know that aside from being a guest, we offer even more opportunity to boost your brand? Adding your company logo.
Welcome back to What's Your Story. My guest today is Robert King, and Robert has a consulting practice where he helps get drugs to market faster, working with pharmaceutical firms in clinical trials, et cetera. And before break, I said to him I wanted to hear an example of this in action. So time's yours.
Sure. Well, let me give you my first example that sort of set me on this path 17 years ago. 17 years ago, I was working with a large pharmaceutical company in the area, and they had a negotiation ongoing. They had a service that they needed. They had identified an area of risk that they had to address, and they wanted to hire a vendor to help them with that. And unfortunately, for 3 months, all people had done was basically screaming at each other across the table because there was one key issue that no one could get past.
Who's in the room?
Who was in the room? It would be the attorneys and the salespeople from both sides. Okay. It's a large pharmaceutical company and a vendor helping them with an information technology matter.
What happened?
And so what happened was I was brought in late in the game. Really, I was brought in to walk away from the deal, just to see if there's any way to salvage it. And we started talking about this one issue. And the problem is that the vendor was going to have access to an extremely sensitive piece of information. And the pharmaceutical company was justifiably nervous. And what they wanted was, if this information was let loose, they wanted the vendor to make them whole. The problem was that the pharmaceutical company was so big that doing that would have bankrupted the vendor. So there was no way the vendor was going to agree to this. And so you were just stuck. And so for 3 months, nothing had happened. Now, when you're trying to get a contract signed, it should be the easiest job in the world because you have two people in the room, two entities that already want to work together. And I came in, and what I did was I said, okay, let's back away from this problem. Let's talk about everything else and try to start rebuilding trust. But while that was going on, I had the operational people talking about the issue. When the lawyers talk, what they tend to do is they worry about what is the worst possible thing that can happen. That's how lawyers think. But we got the operational people talking, and what we learned while they were talking, again over the course of a week and a half, was that while there was this potential problem, there were all sorts of ways that operationally we could mitigate the risk. We could limit our access. We could make sure that there was no way for it to go out to the world. Suddenly, this unmanageable problem that couldn't be solved was manageable. And 2 weeks later, we had a deal, which worked to everyone's benefit. If the lawyers had stayed in their boxes, that never would have happened. And so it's like a big light bulb going over again, lawyers, so you're not necessarily the most open to other ideas, at least at that point 18 years ago, but it turned me on. And so since that time, I have always been over backwards because I'm never going to know as much about the science and the risks in a trial as the people that are actually performing the trial, the medical personnel. And until you can figure out those risks, risk is at the interaction of what's on the paper and what's happening in the real world. If you don't talk about what's going to happen in the real world, how can you be effective at working out a deal? And so that was the path. That was 18 years ago, and how it expressed it really more in the area of clinical trials is, I know 2 summers ago, I was working with a company that had a cancer drug, and they were approached by a Belgian researcher who said, if we change how you're using this drug a little bit, we think we can extend the lifespans of terminal cancer patients from 1 month to 3 months. The only catch was we had to get everything in place in a week or the budget would go away. So think about that. It takes usually 2, 3, 4, 5 months to put these deals into place. If we didn't have the deal in place in a week, it would be a year, and these people have a lifespan of a month. That's what's expected. What is the value to someone when you're at that stage of your life of having an extra 2 months to spend with your child?
I can only imagine.
An extra 2 months to get your affairs in order or to knock something off your bucket list. And so we pulled out every plug. We got everyone involved. It was all hands on deck, and we found a way to get the deal done.
Sounds very collaborative, your approach.
It is very collaborative. Again, there are areas where I have expertise, but again, you've got to get that interaction because there are ways to attack risk that don't necessarily involve a clause. Talk to the people in the real world, get them involved, get their buy-in. When you're problem solving, 2 heads, 3 heads, 5 heads, assuming you can get them all in the right direction, is always going to be better than one.
Let's put this all in context. Can you give the audience a sense of your journey, how you got here along the way?
Well, for me, I had a fairly standard career, and then along came the Great Recession. I had a job with a company that I absolutely loved. It was running a contracts group for a technology company. I'd had some experience in pharmaceuticals. I'd actually gone off that path for a little while. And it was great. I was good at my job. I had a lot of responsibility. I was successful. And the recession came and the company went bankrupt. And I was, like a lot of people, laid off and out of work. And what happened is I was able to find some occasional contract work. But as things got worse, it was harder and harder to find work until finally there simply wasn't any work to be found. Look, there are more important things in your life than just your job or your career. But certainly a lot of us have a whole lot of ourselves wrapped up into it.
Yes, that's
and so
true.
During the recession, I lost just about everything that really mattered to me. It took a long time to get back on my feet. I ended up moving halfway across the country from Pennsylvania to Texas and having that process start. And the most important thing I lost along the way was my self-respect. And started to build myself up. One day the phone rings when I'm in Texas. It's a recruiter asking me if I want to handle a couple clinical trials for a vendor of AstraZeneca. Only catch is it's back in Philadelphia. So I went to Texas to come back home to Philadelphia. Was successful with getting their trials going right. One trial led to another company, other pharmaceutical companies, and that was, 7 years ago? 7, 8, so it's been a real journey. And just a real appreciation that I never would have had otherwise. It was a difficult journey, but I can tell you that at times when you feel like you've lost everything, a chance to come back and take part in my profession, particularly in a field like this, where you're actually having a real world impact on people's lives, is tremendous.
So it sounds to me like you've found the right audience to serve, and it's going to impact lots and lots and lots of people. It's just not one person you're helping or one company you're helping. Mm. You're really setting the stage to help lots of people and families that have been the victims of these diseases or these conditions that are hard to overcome.
It is. Look. I'm never going to be smart enough to be a scientist. That wasn't my gift. I'm an attorney. I push paper professionally for a living, but I do it in a field and in a way that actually makes people's lives better. And that's just tremendously rewarding. The opportunity to come back and help people to find these solutions so they can spend more time with the people they love, so they can recover better, is just unbelievable.
So I think you just may have answered my next question.
Sure.
It's like, why are you so committed to this particular line of work?
It's more than that. I mean, that was sort of the past journey, but I find myself now with a new endeavor. I'm starting a company. I'd always worked with big pharma. Now I've formed a company to ideally work with smaller companies because I think they need the support more. But it's not that I chose this profession. In a way, I think it chose me. Given what I do for a living, I face a really tough problem out there. The people with whom I work at these drug companies or the medical researchers, they're brilliant. I mean, I can't hold a spark to them. And so you're working with smart people trying to solve really big issues, and I think I can make a difference. And frankly, being an attorney, when people come to you, it's not that they don't know the answers. Half the time they don't even know the questions. They're confused and they're frustrated because no one went into the field of medical research or life sciences to spend all their time with lawyers, and yet here we are. So if you can help them solve that problem, help them do what they were born to do, it's incredibly rewarding. And for me, this is what I was born to do, to make this better, to find a way to find success professionally for myself, but also to help the people that are afflicted.
Well stated.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask you a question. It may sound irrelevant, but maybe it isn't. If you had to have an opportunity to have dinner with anybody, living or dead, who do you want to have dinner with?
You're throwing this one out of left field. Okay, let me
That's
think about
fine,
this.
man.
All right, I'm not religious. Okay, but I got to say I would be curious about having dinner with Jesus Christ because I'd certainly like his take on things. And to be honest, I'm a fan of old movies. I would love to sit down with Groucho Marx. So
there's a contrast.
So certainly we're going to have a very different conversation during that particular meal. But I think that would, let's face it, you're taking two people from history. That's going to be memorable to begin with, but damn, that would be an interesting conversation.
Getting back to drugs and medical practices and trials, What's on the horizon for this field? What's going on in the pharma world and in terms of, you know, money being poured into the next big drug? We hear there's no big drugs in the pipeline at the moment.
Well, there are and there aren't. There are certain some areas that are not receiving the support that you would expect. I know that antibiotics, a lot of them are not as well supported. What you're seeing now is a lot of interest in really specialized diseases, where it may be a very small number of people afflicted, but it's very specialized. The problem that they're having in many instances is that the cost of treatment there can be very high. And so, again, in the financial world, in the regulatory world, how do we catch up? The way that we compensate doesn't always match what's going on in the scientific world, and certainly the regulations are never going to be up to date.
What do you mean compensate? What do you mean?
Well,
what are you referring
again,
to?
ultimately, look, like this, we have a for-profit, you know, medical device and drug market
Sure
out
we
there.
do. Yeah.
So my understanding is, for example, I believe it's hepatitis C. They came up with a full cure of it, but it cost a significant amount of money. So the insurers aren't always comfortable in fully supporting this cure. Another problem that I've heard about recently, I was at basically what's called a startup grind. It's a gathering of startups, and I was speaking to a person, and they were trying to deal with issues involving addiction. And they found that they had actually created a video or sort of a game that they found was just as effective in dealing with addiction issues as traditional treatments. The problem was no one wanted to pay for it as they would for additional treatments. So again, you want to have as many options out there to find effect, because what is effective for one person may not be effective for another person. But we're having problems because of really the advance in science and the fact that we're stepping outside the realm of traditional methodologies of figuring out how to get the economic incentives and the payment systems in line with what's going on.
So here's another challenge that's facing the community. We are running out of time.
Okay.
And I really want to thank you. You were so open and candid. I'm much more educated now than I was before. But this is an opportunity to look into the camera, Robert, and speak to the audience.
Okay.
More information. You may have an ask of them. You may have an idea to share with them, but time's yours.
Well, basically, one of the things that I'm doing, obviously the big thing I'm doing, is I'm shifting markets. I've always worked for big pharma with all its bureaucracy and all of its ways of doing things. And now I'm trying to bring services to medical researchers directly, and also to the smaller companies that I feel can't afford to have the same waste and just inefficiencies that the big companies have. So
you want to reach out to these people?
I would like to, if you're a medical researcher who is interested in being a PI on a study sometime in the next few months, or you are contemplating as a life science company having a trial sometime in the next half year, then I'd love to talk to you about what you're doing, because I believe there's a better way to approach these issues, and I'd love to hear from you, no strings attached. It's an opportunity to have some conversation over a cup of coffee, talk about the issues that you're facing and how you're attacking them, and I would love a chance to hear what you have to say and perhaps give you some ideas that might make your world a little bit easier to get by.
How would they get in touch with you?
Well, the best way to get in touch with me would be via my email address. My email address is underneath my name up there. It's robert.king@takepointclinical.com, all one word. And I would welcome any inquiries.
Well, again, I want to thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you.
We're always trying to bring somebody that's authentic and genuine for the audience with a topic they may not know a lot about, but will impact their lives sooner or later. So again, I want to thank you all for tuning in. We'll be here again next week. Same authentic guests, all trying to be insightful to you and your family. And be well. See you next week.